My name is Kunal, and welcome to the Geeks of the Valley podcast, which connects with some of the brightest minds globally who are leading their respective industries today to discuss the hottest upcoming industry trends and how their work is affecting the global economy. This morning from the San Francisco Bay Area, we have a very special guest joining us, who used to live in Hong Kong and is the ex-valedictorian at Princeton University. Please welcome the co-founder of Polygence, Jin Chow, aka Jin Yun. Jin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, Kunal. Thank you so much for having me.
And how are things over there in light of COVID-19?
Things are still a bit crazy. It's been an extremely hectic week with protests and rallies, but the good thing, I guess, is restaurants are starting to open again, and I went out to eat for the first time in a few months now, and it's been a good week so far.
I'm really happy to hear that, Jin. Let's dive into our first question, shall we?
Sure, sounds good.
So tell me about yourself and your background and how it led you to the path of becoming an entrepreneur in Edtech.
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Hong Kong. I left Hong Kong at age 18 for Princeton, where I majored in comparative literature. And it was really at Princeton that I had this intellectual awakening where I fell in love with learning languages, with literature, with the humanities. And I also fell in love with education because all throughout my 4 years at Princeton, I did a lot of education-related mentorship programs and ventures, and including where I taught in some of New Jersey's prisons. And after Princeton, I went straight to Stanford to start my PhD, also in comparative literature. And it was really at Stanford where I had really, really great conversations with my co-founder, Janos Perczel, who actually is the husband of one of my college best friends. And it was at Stanford where we really decided to start this venture together. And strangely enough, it was a dinner table conversation where we were talking about the untapped talent all around us, with grad students and PhD candidates who are passionate educators, who have so much to share with students, but who have a hard time finding and connecting with students who need their expertise. And so through that conversation, we just decided that, like, why not start this venture together? And so it brings me to now where we've had this company running for a little over a year now. And I'm at the perfect juncture in my own PhD to take a bit of a break and to work on the business full time. And so looking back, I think there were so many experiences throughout my academic background and through my schooling that have led me to become interested in education. But it's really interesting because I never thought I would be in business, I never thought I would become an entrepreneur. So yeah, that's what brought me here today.
Wow. So when it comes to what you co-founded, right? You co-founded Polygence.
Yes.
What is it all about and what do you envision for it long term?
Yeah, so Polygence is, strictly speaking, an online research academy where students, predominantly middle school and high schoolers, get a chance to be paired with researchers in their field of academic interest to execute a unique, bite-sized research project. And we have mentors in fields ranging from computational biology to business to fashion design to French and Spanish literature to like machine learning. So basically whatever a student might potentially be interested in, we most probably have a mentor for that kind of project. And our vision basically is to become the go-to marketplace for project-based learning and research mentorship. What we want is for students who have interests that either lie outside of their high school or home institutions, or with interests and talents beyond what their institutions can cater to. We want them to be able to connect with someone who is an expert in that field, and execute a cool, interesting project that they could potentially use for college admissions or just have a pet project that they work on the side. And obviously the super long-term goal would be to transform education systems around the world, to really promote project-based learning as a mode of education and of learning. And also, in addition to our paying program where students pay to enroll, we also have a growing pro bono program where we offer our services for free or for a drastically reduced rate for students from low-income backgrounds. And Polygence and me and also my co-founder Janos we're all very committed to alleviating education inequality and to close that gap. And so that's something we're really conscious of as well.
So, Chin, when you were younger, right, while living in Hong Kong, you taught new immigrants who did not speak Cantonese or English how to speak these languages. Furthermore, at Princeton, you founded something called PrEP, which focused on going into the New Jersey jails and teaching inmates life skills and job interview skills in order to improve their future. What did these experiences teach you, and how did it kind of lead into Polygence and what you created?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think all of these experiences that you mentioned, they're volunteer experiences and also sort of like social impact oriented education experiences. And I think all of these made me a lot more committed to the principle of education accessibility and equity. And I think they also taught me that I often have as much to learn from my students as they have to learn from me. And what that means is that a lot of times when I remember during those high school summers where I taught at this small NGO where we worked with new immigrants, mainly mainland Chinese immigrants and children from mainland China to Hong Kong. A lot of times what I would have planned for the class would not necessarily be what would be most beneficial for these children. And I think looking back, sort of the teaching feedback that I got from these students has been invaluable in teaching me to listen to my users, which in this case is students, and what they need from me and what would most benefit their own academic and intellectual journeys might not necessarily be what I planned, what I cooked out of my head during my lesson planning time. And so definitely like listening to what my users need has been something that this experience has really helped me with learning. And in the case of my experience teaching in prisons, I guess I can give you a little bit more context. So PrEP was a program that I started where we taught job readiness and societal reintegration skills to inmates who will be released soon from prisons. And we taught in 4 to 5 different prisons all across New Jersey near the Princeton area, including some male prisons, some juvenile prisons, and also some female prisons. And I felt like that experience was really more a test for me than really a test for my students. It was really a test of how much an Ivy League educated international students can really bring to real life concerns of inmates who are about to go on parole or who are about to leave. And I think it made me confront my ivory tower education and ivory tower bubble a lot more, and to think long and hard about whether there even is anything of value I can bring to my students. And I can give you an example. When I first designed the curriculum, I prepared general interview questions, resume writing materials, things that I used to craft my own resume and my own cover letters for internships or even for college. But more often than not, my students' questions would stump me, and I would have to go back and do a lot more research before going back to them and answering their questions. For example, one of my students had been in prison for, I think, about 20 to 30 years. She was an older woman. She was a 65-year-old woman at the Edna Man prison, which is a female prison in New Jersey. And I remember when I was teaching her a class on resume writing, she had actually asked me what email is, because she had never used it, had never heard of it. And sort of technology access in prisons is obviously very limited as well. And so the class ended up sort of pausing, and I had to explain to her what the internet was and how email worked. And so situations like this really made me realize what kind of, or like how to shape my own teaching to fit the needs of my students and to really listen to what they need and want. And it was a very, very humbling experience, definitely.
Yeah, it seems quite interesting. I mean, especially when it comes to this aspect of having experience that not many people really have. I mean, it's quite unique in its own way.
Yeah.
So, Jin, when it comes to Edtech, it seems like you've been involved in it for quite a while, for a good amount of your career. And what are some of the trends you're seeing and how it's developing in East Asia?
Yeah, so East Asia is a very interesting space when it comes to EdTech, especially because of the switch towards online learning that we're seeing. Partly because, as technology develops further, online learning and virtual learning environments will become more and more of the norm. But also, I think in light of COVID, the whole world, but also including East Asia, is really switching to online platforms, partly because schools are shutting down and students are moving to Zoom classrooms, but also because it's just more convenient and you can connect people from different parts of the world or the city to each other in ways that were never before available. And so a lot of edtech companies that are founded, I think, and that have made a big splash and influence in East Asia are companies that are focused on virtual learning. And one of these that I can think of as VIP Kid, right? This is a company that is founded around the mission of English learning, and language learning in general is a huge industry within East Asian EdTech, I think, in particular with English language learning. And I think the other two sectors that are pretty dominant within East Asian EdTech is college admissions, so college consulting, test prep, that kind of stuff, as well as subject-based tutoring. So for example, like if a student needed help with an IB exam in physics or with AP exam in APUSH. And so I think also as education in the US and the UK, or sort of like continue to be a prestige marker, a lot of companies will continue to pop up that will be dealing with this side of college admissions and helping students with the college application process. And I think these companies are and will continue to be on the rise, at least for the foreseeable future, and especially with test prep as well. Although I'm not sure if you've seen, but the UC, so the University of California system, recently announced that they will be phasing out standardized testing from requirements for admission, so the SAT and the ACT. So perhaps that sector of EdTech will be impacted because of this wave of decisions, starting with the UC and other liberal arts colleges. But I think college admissions as an industry will still definitely be a very big one in East Asia, at least. And in terms of EdTech that is sort of more brick and mortar and not like virtual, I think having come from Hong Kong, I know for a fact that the brick and mortar tutoring industry is still very much booming and is one of the most lucrative industries of all time. Yeah, so I think that trend will definitely continue to be on the rise.
Interesting. I was just about to also mention, I was about to say, yeah, the UC systems were recently about to not allow for these standardized tests, right? And so what is your take on that? Do you think it's a positive or negative thing? Do you feel neutral about it? How do you kind of see it further developing down the line?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We at Polygence, we actually wrote a blog post recently responding to that, to the UC's decision to remove standardized testing or phase out standardized testing. And I think what I think about it is that I think it's a really good thing, because I think standardized testing promotes the wrong kind of learning, the wrong kind of pedagogy, and the wrong kind of studying techniques. I think the SAT and ACT tests how well you are able to take the SAT and ACT, rather than how good of a communicator, writer, mathematics student you are. And I think that with the phasing out of these standardized testing, students have a lot more opportunity to showcase their talents, their interests, and their ability to perform independent inquiry through precisely programs like Polygence or through any kind of independent projects that they work on. And I think standardized testing is helpful insofar as it gives, a standardized way of judging students relative to one another. But I think moving forward, holistic evaluations of students, including their ability to perform independent inquiry, to engage in research, I think that will become much more indicative of a bar of how to judge students than standardized testing will be. So I'm hopeful in that, this trend will continue and that other schools will also phase out standardized